welcome to episode 4 of a podcast about murder. I'm Freya and I'm here with Jem yet again for another worthwhile discussion about a homicidal incident. How are you doing this morning, Jem?
Can't complain. Ready for murder.
I was just about to say, are you ready to talk about murder? Great. Well, today we're going to talk about the so-called Luton Sack Murder. This one is going to take us back further than we have ever been so far.
Well, I'm ready. Take me back.
Back to 1943, which is well over years ago. I was counting on you to do the maths really quickly there.
Okay. 76.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Britain was entering its 4th year of war, so obviously this was not an easy period of time. That was basically all the news that people needed to hear. Are we still at war? Yes, we are. All right, that's the most important thing that could be happening, you know what I mean? But amazingly, there was something that could displace the Second World War from the headlines for a short while. And that thing was a mysterious, sensationalized murder in the town of Luton. Luton is a town in England to the north or slightly northwest of London. It contains a well-known airport surfacing the London area. There is a university, and I'm sure there's some other things there, but I'm ashamed to admit that I actually didn't know Luton was an entire place until about 5 years ago. I thought it was just the name of an airport, and all there was an airport.
To be fair, I think I thought the same for longer than I'm proud to admit.
I'm sorry to alienate anyone, but I am that very classic sort of Londoner who really doesn't know anything about the geography of the country, except for London, and seems perfectly happy not to know. I am trying to do better, but just to rag on Luton for a moment longer, it was voted by Redditors in 2016 as the worst town in Britain. There was even a poll on a news article I read about this saying, what should be done with Luton? And the options were nuke it, build a wall around it, or nothing.
Jesus.
62% of readers wanted Luton nuked.
Yeah, okay.
When I went to find images of Luton for the YouTube version of this episode, I spent ages looking for the best visual portrayal of Luton. I was trying to be really nice in the way I was presenting it. And the image that I settled on still came from a site with the title, Luton, England's Toilet. So,
So, now that we've lost everyone from Luton.
I'm so sorry if you are from Luton and are listening, but I'm just a messenger, really. Back to 1943, there was a motor factory on the outskirts of Luton, a Vauxhall motor factory, which I believe still exists today. And there's a very sorry-looking river, and I'm sorry, but that's just the fact, called the River Lea, exists running through Luton. And this river runs close to where this factory was. A thick fog had settled over the area on the morning of the 19th of November, 1943. Just setting the scene for you.
Dramatic?
It's cold, obviously. And it was the changing of the shifts at the factory from, I assume, night workers to daytime workers. So the footpath that gave access to the factory and which ran along the River Lea was full of people going to and fro. There was something lying in the water, but to be frank, there were a lot of things lying in the water. Barely anyone noticed it. Even the people who did notice it walked on by. But in the afternoon, around 2:15, 2 sewage workers who were checking the water levels realised this dark bundle was not like the others.
I might go out on a limb here. Could it be a body?
Oh, what would make you think that? Jesus. The sewage workers inspected it and found that it was the body of a woman wrapped in multiple sacks. They were there the previous day, so they knew it wasn't there before. And this river, it's quite shallow. It doesn't, I mean, I've never been there, but from the photos, it looks like it doesn't run, you know, in the same way.
Right. So she hasn't been
so she couldn't have been
down.
Carried necessarily. I think things are carried, but not at the speed where it's like, I put something in here and it's gone the next day. I don't think it runs that fast, but I could be wrong. To them, it followed that it must have been dumped during the course of the night. The half-submerged body appeared to have been badly beaten, and there were also cords binding her. The police were called, and the sacks and the body were retrieved. They couldn't find any signs of a struggle nearby or any blood, so they concluded that the murder had happened elsewhere, and the victim's body had been brought to the area just to be offloaded, as it were. The police found tyre tracks nearby, but these were attributed to a milk truck shortly thereafter, which is, we used to still have those, I guess. Actually, we still had milk delivered, like, in a glass bottle to our house as recently as, I want to say, 2003 or 2005 even.
Even, yeah, later, because I remember coming to your house and finding that just, like,
So quaint.
sort of magical thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that I think they should have kept doing
What's
that.
happened to them? Where have the milkmen gone?
Yeah, what do they do now? An initial examination of the victim was carried out by a police physician who found a laceration in the woman's cheek and incorrectly determined the cause of death as a gunshot wound to the head. The victim's body had been wrapped in 4 sacks. They figured out the origins of these sacks as far as their purpose. 2 were potato sacks, 1 was for sugar, and the 4th was for soda. I think they mean the powder rather than the fizzy drink, which I don't think was super, like, soda. I say that because, you know, if someone's listening from North America or someone somewhere else, we don't call fizzy drinks soda. It's like, by soda I think they mean baking powder.
Yeah. So these sacks are, like, sewn together to make one big sack?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, so the tying up of her is actually on the outside, I think. So the tying of the bundle, as it were, is like around the sacks, keeping her inside the sacks. But it's not like a great job. It's just like, yeah,
just like, let's try and make this not obviously a dead woman.
Yeah. Inquiries around the sacks themselves didn't really lead anywhere. Firstly, it wasn't possible to find what company the sugar and soda sacks came from because they had no markings, which, if they had no markings, I find it pretty cool that they were able to say they were sugar and soda sacks.
Yeah. Especially if they've been in the water. I would imagine that would sort of dissolve.
I don't know if they had like a sort of standard shape for like sugar and a standard shape for soda, but it's interesting.
But during the war, wouldn't it be quite rare for someone to be able to get like a whole sack of sugar? Like, is that they didn't pursue that kind of lead?
It's interesting that you say that because I hadn't even thought of that. I don't know how often people got rations of stuff, so I don't know if it's like this could be one person's sack for the year or something. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, that's true.
But as far as the potato sacks, one sack was stamped with just the letters MFD, and the other was traced to a local merchant who didn't keep distribution records regarding his potato-based business, because this is 1943, and we don't do record keeping. The victim was described as being about 5'3", or 160 centimeters, and having brown eyes and dark brown hair. Her body was found naked and not only without any identification, but without any teeth.
Oh, God. I mean, unless this wasn't like a recent phenomenon.
Just wanted to see you react to the without any teeth part. Now I'm going to tell you that I couldn't work out from the research if some teeth had been removed from this woman by the killer, which is pretty hardcore, or if she didn't have any teeth while alive.
Yeah, in which case, none of my business.
It's 1943 and we are in England, which to this day has a reputation for poor dental hygiene. But we'll come back to that because it does come up again. If the teeth were removed by the killer, I suppose this was also a way to conceal her identity because dental records would obviously be no use. Her fingers were still on with their prints, but the police found no matches to her fingerprints. And that kind of work was extremely slow and maybe not even accurate in the 1940s, so no leads there. But they knew there was no way for them to even begin to find the killer without finding out who had been killed. So Scotland Yard were called in, who I'm sure most have heard of, but Scotland Yard is the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police, who deal with London and its surrounding areas. So to ask for the help of Scotland Yard is essentially to ask for the big guns, I guess you would say, because they usually have the most resources. The sacks found with the body were more thoroughly looked at and sent for microscopic examination. A proper autopsy was then carried out by the Home Office pathologist Keith Simpson. He determined the cause of death, a blow to the head. He also determined the woman to have been dead for about 1 day, and that she was in her mid-30s. The people who originally, I think, found the body estimated her to be between 30 and 35, so they were not far off when the pathologist did the accurate examination. He said she was mid-30s. This pathologist was apparently a bit of a rock star at this point, as he had just been on another high-profile case recently to this.
So, like, really getting this fancy big shot pathologist.
Yeah, so he's like big shot to bring in on this, so it was obviously quite a big deal. The injuries to the woman's neck and face that Keith identified were quite vicious. There were finger marks around her throat indicating strangulation. There were many cuts to her face. There was a severe gash on the eyebrow area, and the state of the left side of her face, including the split in her cheek, showed that there had been a heavy blow to her head. And this final injury fractured her jaw, bruising her brain, and resulted in death. She had bruising on her shoulders and back as well, so it was thought that she had been held by the neck and pushed against a hard surface like a floor.
God, this is just so violent and brutal.
It's incredibly brutal. There was more bruising on her elbows, on her hands. It was a very brutal attack that this woman suffered. She had died of her head injury during the binding of the cords around her body. So she was still alive when she was being essentially disposed of. I mean, can you imagine?
Oh, God. This poor woman.
Yes, and they knew this about the cord, about her being still alive, because the binding of the cords around her had caused bruising, some of them, and some of them not. So by the end of the binding, she isn't, like, her blood isn't moving, so she's not creating bruising.
Okay, it's pretty cool they can figure that out.
Keith was able to determine some other interesting things about the victim from his examination. Firstly, there was dental evidence to be used. X-rays showed that she'd had 3 teeth extracted, and chafing showed that she wore dentures. So this is another reason why I'm confused about the circumstances around the teeth, because when I think of dentures, I think of no teeth at all. But I think you can also have partial dentures.
Yeah.
This woman is supposedly a maximum of 35, so I think pretty rough having no teeth. But like I said, this is the 40s, and we are in the UK. Anyway, the other major thing Keith Simpson discovered during the autopsy was that this woman had, A, given birth before, and she was actually carrying a pregnancy 5.5 months at the time of her death.
Oh, God. But no signs... I mean, I hate to even ask this question, but she hadn't been raped or...
No, there was no sexual assault. This wasn't thought to be the motive, a sexual motive.
Right.
That's a good question. Police circulated images of the victim, hoping somebody would come forward to say that they had known her. These photos had to be altered. And I have no idea how they did that in those days. But they altered the photos to clean up her face from the injuries and try and show her more as she might have been in life. But it was still incredibly difficult because her features had been changed by this attack. Incredibly. Yeah. Police couldn't match her to any of the 404 women who were on missing persons lists at that time. Although many people went to view the body to see if it was their missing loved one. These people were obviously sadly desperate, as this victim was identified as 4 different women. And she wasn't any of those people. Police ruled them all out. But so no one contacted the police to identify her. But unbeknownst to police, she had been recognised. Her 2 sons, walking past a shop window, saw a poster of her face and told their father that the woman was their mother. Their father said he'd seen the mother since the murder, so it couldn't have been her. But her sons hadn't seen her.
Suspicious. Very shady.
Sadly, the victim's daughter had seen this picture previously and not recognized her own mother. So that gives you an idea of just how disfiguring this beating was, really.
Yeah. So I assume they're children still at this point.
I believe the daughter is teenaged.
Okay.
I couldn't really keep track of how many children they had. I think they had 2 daughters and 2 sons.
Okay.
One of the daughters was an older teenager. The other one was younger, about 8. And the 2 sons, I think, were the youngest. Meanwhile, police searched for remnants of the victim's clothes, assuming they were discarded as she was found naked. Clothes were hardly ever thrown away at this time during the war because they were scarce, and so when clothes were found discarded, it really was a thing of interest. Police recorded every piece of fabric they found. Amazingly, during inquiries, the police unknowingly knocked on the door of the victim's house.
Oh.
They showed the 2 boys a picture of the victim, their mother, but the boys didn't tell the police that they thought it was their mother. They didn't even tell the police that their mother had left recently and that they hadn't seen her. And I don't know if this was like fear of the dad or whether it was not even fear so much, but just you trust your dad, so when he says, oh no, that's not her, you just go.
Yeah, you don't question it.
A few months later, the clothes gathered during the investigation were re-examined looking for missing clues. A piece of the woman's coat was looked at, and it still had a tag on it from a dry cleaner's where it had been fairly recently dyed. Records of the dry cleaners showed that the coat belonged to a woman called Mrs. Caroline Manton, who lived in Regent Street. It said that when the police went to the victim's home and an 8-year-old girl opened the door, they knew they were in the right place, because even though the victim had been so disfigured, they now recognized her face in the face of this child instantly.
Oh, God.
Comparison of photographs from the home made them even more certain that they could say this woman was the victim. But still, they need to find some more evidence to confirm this, because I'll put the side-by-side picture because they really do look like 2 different people. In fact, I'll show you.
Oh, my God. I mean...
You wouldn't know that they...
No.
Like, I could think I was going to imagine what the dead woman would look like. That isn't what I would imagine. Everything about her features, I would imagine totally differently. Police tracked down Caroline's mother, who said that she hadn't seen her in a few months, but that she had received letters from her. The letters were produced, and Chief Inspector Chapman noted many spelling errors in them. Here we come to the victim's husband, Bertie Manton. Real name, Horace William Manton. So there's not even a Bert in there.
No idea where Bertie comes from.
Bertie Manton was a fireman and an ex-lightweight boxer.
So there's a certain background here.
Yeah. I don't want to stereotype all boxers, but...
I mean, let's just say he's a physical person.
He told police he and his wife had argued and she had simply left the family home. He claimed he thought she had gone to her mother's or to her brother's. When shown pictures of his dead wife, he said it wasn't her and he didn't know who it was. He is also said to have remarked, "I wouldn't do anything like that. My wife is alive." Bit weird.
It's kind of weird to say that out, just like...
Nobody asked you.
No, I think she's gone to her mum's, and I wouldn't murder her. I'm not that kind of person.
Cleverly, Chief Inspector Chapman asked Bertie to write a few sentences that he dictated from Caroline's supposed letters to her mother. When Chapman saw that Bertie misspelled the word Hampstead without a P, his suspicions were confirmed that Bertie had faked the letters from Caroline, because the word Hampstead had also been misspelled in Caroline's letters as Hampstead, which isn't correct.
I'm looking at this guy with a lot of suspicion, but at the same time, it is possible. I will conceive that there's a possibility that maybe he's just trying to reassure his kids. Like, if he genuinely doesn't know where his wife is, maybe he's just faking letters to reassure them. I don't find that totally believable myself.
No, alone, it's really not very much evidence at all. It's kind of it's very, very suspicious, but you could argue, like now I'm sure a really good lawyer these days would argue instantly, he wanted to make the mother and the children not worry about her.
Yeah.
And he was just trying to deal with it in the best way he could. That's what a good lawyer would argue. Bertie was arrested, though. We just had that whole conversation. And I didn't realise that was the very next thing that happens. Bertie was arrested as soon as police were able to track down her dentist. And they formally matched her dental work with the dentist's records. So they knew it was Caroline.
Okay, so they've like confirmed it.
Pretty much confirmed. Bertie didn't resist this arrest, and he simply said, "I'm sorry to have told you lies about my wife. I killed her.
Oh.
But it was only because I lost my temper. I didn't intend to." Well, that makes it all okay then.
Yeah, I didn't mean to. I swear.
To be honest, I don't at all understand this concept that men, they seem to give quite regularly when killing their wives with brutal assaults, which is like, oh, I didn't mean to kill her, I just lost my temper.
Well, it's also like, I didn't mean to batter her around and then tie her up and then put her in a sack and throw her in the river. There's quite a few steps to this.
There's steps, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, you just meant to beat her within an inch of her life. Like, fantastic. You know?
Great.
I mean, when you lose your temper and you hit someone once, it's obviously not a good thing to have done. It's not good to have lost control. That's not excusable. But in cases like this, it's like there's a point where the defense of, oh, I didn't mean to kill her, I just momentarily lost it, is just really absurd, like you're saying.
Yeah.
You haven't hit this woman once. You haven't hit her twice. It's like a sustained attack.
Yeah.
She's completely disfigured.
Like, to the point where her kids can't recognise her.
Yeah, I know this is the 40s. Maybe most men are abusing their wives in some way, but it's outrageous still.
Yeah. Also, she had bruising on her hands, right? Which makes me think that maybe she tried to defend herself as well.
That sounds like a pretty good assumption to me. That's what I would have thought, defensive wounds. Bertie told police that an argument had broken out on the 18th of November over lunch. He claimed that, and I don't mean over lunch, I don't mean like the argument was over lunch, I mean they were having lunch and they had an argument. He claimed that Caroline threw a hot cup of tea in his face and that he responded by grabbing a wooden stool and beating her to death.
Fucking hell. Like, Jesus. Where were the kids at this point?
It's over lunch.
Maybe they're at school.
Maybe they're at school, but then I'm thinking, do they go to school during... I guess they do go to school during war. I mean, the war is nearly... I don't know, it's 43. It's about to be over soon. I don't know if they're doing
Well, they don't know that.
Still. No, I guess not, but I don't know. I don't have a lot of knowledge about, like, what everyday life was like during the war.
No, me neither.
So, Caroline supposedly throws this hot cup of tea. Bertie beats her to death.
A normal reaction.
If this even happened, I mean, come on, like, we've heard so many of these types of things where people are like, and then she provoked me. And it's like, okay, but then you killed her. Did she deserve the death sentence for throwing a cup of tea at you?
Yeah.
He then apparently, quote, realised what he had done. Yeah, that classic line.
Yeah. I just didn't realise what I was doing as I methodically beat my wife to death. Jesus.
So he removed her jewellery and clothes, got the sacks from the cellar, and tied her up in them. He moved her down to the cellar and left her down there while he cleaned up the blood. The children returned from school. Okay, so they are at school. I wrote this and I didn't remember what I wrote.
But then, so he doesn't work. Or maybe he's on a break. We don't know. This isn't...
Well, he's a fireman, so is he, like, on call?
I guess.
I don't really know. There must have been a reason why he wasn't drafted as well.
Or maybe
Unless
if you
being
are a fireman...
Yeah, maybe if you work in, like, social services, you're important enough to stay at home. Our ignorance is probably astounding to someone who knows anything about this.
We're just really digging a hole for ourselves this episode.
The children returned from school, and Bertie told them that their mother had gone to their grandmother's house. After their bedtime, Bertie took Caroline's body out of the house, and my gosh, just imagine this, draped it over the handlebars of his bike
Oh my
and
god.
wheeled it to the bank of the river. I mean, who didn't see this?
Yeah. My god.
He burned Caroline's clothing and her dentures. After this confession, police found bloodstains in the living room. These stains were on the walls and even on the ceiling, so just another testament to how vicious this is. The force that went into that. They could determine blood group by that point, which is interesting, and they were all from O, same as Caroline's. So that's another little bit of evidence.
I mean, at this point, he has confessed, though. I guess you
but
still need to back it up.
I find it really impressive that even back then, they're like, we need, a really strong case. They couldn't find any fingerprints, as everything seemed to have been thoroughly cleaned. I have to say, like I was just saying a second ago, I think they're doing an amazing job for 1940s police, given everything else that's going on in the world at that time.
Yeah.
They seem to have methodically and carefully gone through everything, collected as much evidence as they can, and they're really building up a strong case against Bertie rather than just kind of going, well, he said he did it. They want it to be...
Yeah.
They want to be sure that they've got this right. After searching the house for a second time, they found a pickle jar with a fingerprint on it, finally, and they were able to match this to Caroline. So now they could say, with no shadow of a doubt, that this victim was the wife of Bertie Manton. The trial began on 18th of May 1944. Bertie told the court how he had killed his wife in anger and then panicked and hidden the body to keep it from the children. The defence, of course, argued that Bertie was provoked by Caroline and that he should receive a manslaughter charge, not murder.
Yeah, fucking right. Like, no fucking chance.
The prosecution contended that Caroline, at her size, posed no physical threat to her husband. It wasn't as if this was like a fair game in which he was fighting for his life.
Yeah, it's not self-defense.
There's no way she could have overpowered him, basically. The jury concluded that the cover-up of the murder didn't gel with the idea of a spur-of-the-moment action, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
And Bertie was found guilty, and he was sentenced to death by hanging, as we still did that back then. On appeal, this sentence was commuted to life in prison. His children campaigned for mercy on his behalf, interestingly. They said he was a good father. I don't know about that, because... Can you be a good father if you deprived your children of a mother?
Good point. I guess the bar is very low for good fathers at this point in history.
In the 40s, yeah. That's so true. But I don't know about that. I don't know. Even if he was the nicest person to them in the world, it's like he's a killer.
Yeah.
And your mum died. I don't know if they just like didn't like her that much or something. Or maybe it was like, okay, we've lost one parent. We don't want to lose another one. So.
And they're quite young. Like, maybe it's hard for them to sort of understand everything that's happened.
Yeah, it's possible. But just 3 years later, in November 1947, Bertie Manton fell ill and died. And he died in Parkhurst Prison on the Isle of Wight. We covered Dennis Nilsen in episode 1, the serial killer, and he was also at this prison for a time. So, just an interesting connection. I suppose there are these, like, high-profile prisons where they've been around for a really long time.
Yeah.
And they carry the worst of the worst. So, if you haven't already looked at that episode, go ahead and do that. So, that is the case of the Luton Sack Murder, the murder of Caroline Manton. It's pretty straightforward in the sense that it's solved fairly quickly, and it was the husband, as many would expect, but I found the investigation procedure interesting.
Yeah. I'm surprised by how competent the police were.
Right. This was great police work, there's no doubt about it. For the time, they were doing great. And it's important to cover cases like this, I think, because in England and Wales, now, 2 women are killed by a partner or former partner each week.
That's a disturbing amount of women.
We like to think that back in the 40s, everyone was a wife beater and it's better now. And in some ways, I'm sure it is better. But a quarter of all women nowadays still experience domestic violence.
Which is fucking horrible. Like, a quarter.
A quarter is a shockingly large amount. I just wanted to mention Refuge and Women's Aid, which are UK charities dedicated to protecting women and children from violence in the home, because they have a 24-hour domestic violence helpline. It's 0808 2000 247. Refuge's website has a bar at the top of the page constantly, which you can click at any time to take you straight to Google if you want to access those resources but you're afraid of your partner seeing. If you know someone who is in a situation like this, support them first and foremost. And secondly, find out the crisis lines in your country and try and let them know with extreme discretion, I can't emphasize that enough, what these lines are and resources so that they have access to this, but
don't endanger them.
Don't endanger their lives by being too open about that. I have to, be extremely cautious. But that's it. Sorry to end on such a sad note, but I wanted to mention those things because I think it's important.
Yeah, definitely.
That when we cover a case like this, that it seems so long ago, but it's so relevant to things that happen all the time now. Just to mention that there is help out there and things can get better. And if you know someone in that situation, just listen to them and just be there for them. The best thing you can do is support them, I think. I'm speaking from what I've read from these organisations and from survivors. So
we can put links to those websites.
I will.
As well.
I will put links to those. I couldn't obviously find the best resources for every country. I had to just do the ones I found for the UK. That's why I say try and find the ones in your country if you need to help someone out. But that is the case of Caroline Manton, and it is relevant, I think, to today. And it's an interesting case. Don't forget to connect with us on social media at About Murder on Twitter, Instagram at A Podcast About Murder, Facebook.com/A Podcast About Murder with no E. These will be in the description box, and if you would like to send us an email, our address is apodcastaboutmurder@outlook.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will join us again next Friday.
Yeah, have a good weekend. See you next time.
We will do it all over again with another case next Friday. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it.